I walked back into my office after months of recovery and caught my sister Patricia selling our family shares behind my back. So I destroyed her deal, reclaimed everything, and made sure she'd never steal from family again. The doctor said I'd need 6 months to recover from my heart surgery. But what they didn't tell me was that while I was fighting for my life, my own blood sister was fighting to steal my legacy. She thought I was too weak to notice the missing signatures, the forged documents, the secret meetings with buyers who smelled opportunity in my absence. But she forgot one thing. I built this empire with my bare hands, and I know every corner, every contract, every clause that could save or destroy us. Before I tell you how I brought her to her knees, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what business lessons you want to hear next. And please hit that subscribe button. It means more to me than Patricia ever did. Let me take you back to the beginning, when trust still lived in our house and Patricia still called me sister without counting dollar signs. I didn't just inherit this business, I bled for it. Started with a food cart outside the subway station, selling my grandmother's tamale recipe to commuters who barely looked up from their phones. Rain or shine, I was there at 5 in the morning, prepping masa and counting coins that would eventually buy my first small restaurant. Patricia watched from the sidelines then, fresh out of college with her business degree and big ideas about how things should be run. She wanted the glamour without the grease stains, the profits without the pain. But I gave her a chance anyway because family means you share the load, right? Wrong. Family means some people wait for you to carry the load so they can steal the rewards. When I brought Patricia into the business 5 years ago, I made her an equal partner. 50% ownership, full access to the books, decision-making power on expansion deals. She cried when I handed her those papers, said she'd never forget how I believed in her. She hugged me tight and promised we'd build something beautiful together, something our children could inherit with pride. I should have known then that her tears were rehearsal for the performance she'd give later when she stabbed me in the back. But I was still naive enough to think blood meant loyalty, that shared DNA came with shared values. Patricia started small with her betrayals, testing my boundaries like a child pushing against rules. She'd schedule meetings without telling me, make promises to vendors that I'd have to keep, spend company money on her personal luxuries, and call them business expenses. When I confronted her, she'd smile that practiced smile and say she was just being proactive, just trying to help. That's how thieves operate. They steal your trust first, then everything else follows. The heart attack came during our busiest season. 3 restaurants, 2 food trucks, and a catering contract that could set us up for life. I was working 18-hour days, managing everything from inventory to payroll, while Patricia handled what she called the creative side, which mostly meant picking out expensive furniture for the corporate office we didn't need. The stress caught up with me in the worst way possible. I collapsed in the kitchen during lunch rush, surrounded by the smell of my grandmother's spice blend and the sound of orders I couldn't fill. The paramedics said I was lucky to be alive. The doctor said I needed immediate surgery and months of recovery if I wanted to see 60. I agreed to everything because I thought I had a business partner I could trust to keep things running. I thought wrong. Patricia visited me exactly twice during my 3-week hospital stay. Both times she brought flowers and paperwork, claiming she needed my signature for routine operational stuff. Insurance renewals, vendor contracts, employee agreements. I was hopped up on pain medication and grateful she was handling things, so I signed whatever she put in front of me. She'd lean over my hospital bed with that concerned sister voice and say things like, "Don't worry about anything, just focus on getting better." Meanwhile, she was setting up shell companies, forging board resolutions, and preparing to sell our family legacy to the highest bidder. The first sign something was wrong came from Maria, our head chef at the flagship location. She called me 3 weeks into my recovery, voice shaking with confusion and anger. "Miss Alina," she said, "Patricia just told all the kitchen staff that you're retiring and she's selling the restaurants. She said you're too sick to work and the family decided this was the best. But Miss Elena, we never got to say goodbye. We never got to thank you for everything." That phone call hit me harder than the heart attack. Not because of the betrayal, I was starting to expect that from Patricia, but because of how she was erasing me from my own story, making my loyal employees think I'd abandoned them without a word, turning my health crisis into her business opportunity. I told Maria I'd be back soon and to keep working like nothing had changed. Then I called my lawyer, David Chen, who'd been handling our contracts since the food cart days. David's voice went cold when I explained what Patricia was doing. Alina, I need to tell you something that's going to make you furious. Patricia called me last week asking about succession planning and what would happen to the business if you became incapacitated. I told her nothing would happen because you're not incapacitated, just recovering. She said the family was concerned about your decision-making ability post-surgery. I should have called you immediately. The next morning, I discharged myself from the cardiac rehabilitation program against medical advice. My chest still ached and I could barely walk from the car to the office entrance, but rage has a way of fueling the body when nothing else will. I used my keycard to enter the building, the one Patricia hadn't thought to deactivate yet, and took the elevator to our third-floor office suite. The receptionist nearly fainted when she saw me. "Miss Reyes," she whispered, "we thought you were... Patricia said you couldn't..." I smiled gently and told her Patricia had been confused about my condition. Then I walked past the conference room where I could hear Patricia's voice through the glass, animated and confident, selling our dreams to strangers in expensive suits. I didn't knock. I didn't announce myself. I just opened the door and stepped into my own boardroom like the ghost of business partnerships past. The silence that followed was worth every painful step I'd taken to get me there. Patricia's face drained of color so fast, I thought she might need her own ambulance. The three men in suits turned to stare at me with the uncomfortable expressions of people who'd caught buying stolen goods. Patricia recovered first, standing up with that same fake smile she'd perfected over the years. "Alina," she said, her voice higher than usual, "you shouldn't be here. The doctor said you need rest. We're just handling some preliminary discussions about the future of the company." Preliminary discussions. That's what she called the systematic dismantling of everything I'd built. I took the empty chair at the head of the table, my chair, in my boardroom, at my company, and looked each buyer in the eye. "Gentlemen, I'm Alima Vasquez, founder and majority owner of Vasquez Enterprises. I understand my sister has been wasting your time with unauthorized negotiations. This meeting is over." The buyers shuffled their papers nervously, glancing between Patricia and me like children caught between arguing parents. The one in the middle, a thin man with nervous hands, cleared his throat. "Miss Vasquez, we were under the impression that the family had made a decision to sell due to health concerns. We have signed letters of intent and preliminary agreements." I laughed, and it wasn't a pleasant sound. You have preliminary agreements with someone who doesn't have the authority to sell what isn't hers. Patricia holds 50% of this company, not 51%. Every major decision requires my approval, including the sale of assets, the transfer of ownership, or the dissolution of operations. She knew this when she arranged these meetings. She was hoping to complete the sale before I recovered enough to stop her. Patricia finally found her voice, though it cracked with desperation. "Elena, you're not thinking clearly. The stress of running 3 locations nearly killed you. We agreed that selling was the best option for everyone. The family business model isn't sustainable anymore." "We never agreed to anything," I said, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You decided to play executioner while I was unconscious, gambling that I'd die before I could expose your theft. But I survived, Patricia. And now you're going to explain to these gentlemen exactly what kind of fraud you've been selling them." What happened next was the most satisfying 10 minutes of my professional life. I pulled out my phone and called David Chen on speaker, asking him to explain to the room the legal requirements for selling a jointly owned company. Then I opened my briefcase, the one I'd grabbed from my home office on the way here, and spread out the original partnership agreement, the corporate bylaws, and the documentation showing Patricia's attempts to exceed her authority. The buyers excused themselves so quickly, they left coffee stains on our conference table. Patricia stood there watching her payday evaporate, her face cycling through emotions like a broken slot machine. She tried anger first, accusing me of being ungrateful for her hard work keeping things running. Then came the guilt, reminding me of all the times she'd supported me through difficult business decisions. Finally, she landed on desperation, begging me to reconsider because the sale would solve all our financial problems and give us both security for retirement. But I was done listening to Patricia's version of reality. I was done pretending that her betrayal was somehow love in disguise. You want to know what security looks like? Security is building something with your own hands and knowing that no one can take it away while you're fighting for your life in a hospital bed. Security is having employees who call to check on you because they know your character, not because they're afraid of losing their jobs. Security is never having to wonder if your own sister is plotting against you while you're unconscious. Patricia started crying then, but they weren't the same tears she'd cried